Ostensibly a little boy in a sailor suit, his careworn face is only vaguely human. His nub of a nose looks like a pair of pinholes. He is covered in brown nicks like scars. His eyes are beady and black. He wears a malevolent smirk. Clasped in his lap, he's holding his own toy, a dog with garish popping eyes and a too big tongue lolling crazily out of its mouth. Here are some other things that people also agree is true about Robert: that he's haunted and that he has caused car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce, and a cornucopia of other misfortunes. Robert is 111 years old and lives at the Fort East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. Before that, he was property of Robert Eugene Otto, an eccentric artist and member of a prominent Key West family. Yes, the doll and the owner had the same name, but the boy answered to Gene. Robert was a childhood gift from Otto's grandfather, who bought the doll during a trip to Germany. Otto's relationship with the doll continued into adulthood. Standing 40 inches tall and stuffed with wood wool known as excelsior, he is dressed in a sailor suit and once bore painted features not unlike those of a jester. His unusual size indicates he may have been fashioned in the image of his constant companion, a boy named Robert Eugene Otto. The boy took Robert as his name, while the boy simply went by Gene. Together they would go on to make history. Gene and Robert were best friends growing up. Legend speculates voodoo played a part in Robert's formative years, while interviews with those close to the Otto family indicate a great deal of emotional energy placed upon the doll during Eugene's lifetime. It is said that young Gene would shift blame when he misbehaved as a child, pointing to the doll saying, "I didn't do it, Robert did it." Gene went on to become a prominent artist. He designed the gallery at Fort East Martello Museum and had plans to make his own museum complete with a wax imprint of the artist's hands as a focal point. Though this dream was never realized, his home became known as the Artist House, and stories of the doll's strange behavior became commonplace with those who encountered him after Gene's death in 1974. Tenants heard footsteps in the attic room above them. A plumber heard giggling and turned to find the doll had moved across the room on its own. Solaris Hill reporter Malcolm Ross visited Robert and said, "It was like a metal bar running down my back. At first when we walked through the door, the look on his face was like a little boy being punished. It was as if he was asking himself, who are these people in my room and what are they going to do to me?" Ross's friends told him Robert's backstory and pointed out the children's furniture. It was at this point that Malcolm noticed a change in the doll's expression, as if he was following the conversation. One of the men made a comment about what an old fool Gene Otto must have been. Robert's expression turned to one of disdain. "There was some kind of intelligence there. The doll was listening to us," they said. Myrtle Reuter purchased the Otto home in 1974. She became Robert's companion and kept him when she moved to Von Pfister Street 6 years later. In 1994, she donated Robert to the Fort East Martello Museum, claiming he moved around her house on his own and was haunted. Myrtle died a few months later, but Robert remained active. Museum staff noticed a shift of energies at the Fort East Martello Museum. Though Robert was not initially on display, he started receiving visitors as word spread about his new residence. Once he was put on exhibit, cameras and electronic devices malfunctioned in his presence, and soon letters began arriving addressed to the doll offering apologies for disrespectful behavior or asking for forgiveness. Letters continued to arrive daily. Ghost hunters, TV shows, psychics, skeptics, and believers visit Robert on a regular basis to witness firsthand the strange stories they have heard. Is Robert cursed by voodoo, thriving on energy placed upon him? A misunderstood doll with a playful spirit? Or perhaps just a doll joined by the spirit of his lifelong companion? What people really remember is what they would probably term as an unhealthy relationship with the doll, says Corey Convertito, curator of the museum and Robert's caretaker. He brought it everywhere. He talked about it in the first person as if he weren't a doll. He was Robert, as in he is a live entity. After some digging, the museum traced Robert's origins to the Steiff Company, the same toy maker that first manufactured a teddy bear in honor of Theodore Roosevelt. Robert was most likely never intended to be sold as a toy. A Steiff historian told the museum that Robert was probably part of a set fabricated for a window display of clowns or jesters. Which is kind of adorable, says Convertito. Especially with his impish behavior, it kind of suits his personality really well. Robert's little sailor suit was not supplied by the company. It was probably an outfit that Otto himself wore as a child. According to legend, young Otto began to blame mishaps on the doll. While this could have been laughed off as childish storytelling, adults also started noticing odd occurrences, especially as Otto and Robert grew older. As an adult, Otto lived in a stately home he called the Artist House, where Robert could be seen positioned in the upstairs window. School children swore that he would appear and reappear, and they avoided the house. Myrtle Reuter purchased the Artist House after Otto's death in 1974, and also became Robert's new caretaker. Visitors swore they heard footsteps in the attic and giggling. Some claimed Robert's expression changed when anyone badmouthed Otto in his presence. Reuter said Robert would move around the house on his own, and after 20 years of antics, she donated him to the museum in 1994. But far from banishing Robert to obscurity, his arrival at the museum marked a turning point for the doll. Since Robert arrived, visitors have flocked to the museum to get a look at the mischievous toy. He has appeared on TV shows, he's had his aura photographed, he's a stop on a ghost tour, and he's inspired a horror movie. He has a Wikipedia entry and social media accounts. Fans can buy Robert replicas, books, coasters, and t-shirts, and they can and do write to him. He gets probably 1 to 3 letters a day, says Convertito. But they aren't typical fan letters, they're often apologies. Many visitors attribute post-visit misfortunes to failing to respect Robert, or even openly disrespecting him, and they write begging for forgiveness. Others ask him for advice, or to hex those who have wronged them. Convertito says they have received around 1,000 letters, which they keep and catalog. Robert also receives emails and homages. At some point, it became known that Robert had a sweet tooth, so people leave and send him candy. Just recently, he received a box containing 8 bags of peppermints, a card, and no return address. Exercising caution, the museum staff does not consume treats sent to Robert. Guests leave him sweets, money, and occasionally joints. It's completely inappropriate, says Convertito. We are still a museum. Convertito is Robert's caretaker. Once a year, she administers a checkup, taking him out of the case and weighing him to assess whether the humid Florida weather has adversely affected his straw-filled body. She is also his proxy, receiving and reading all his emails and letters and running his social media feeds. In August, she photoshopped Robert's knobby face onto the now famous picture of Kim Kardashian popping a bottle of champagne into a glass balanced on her behind. It was in order to attract attention to a campaign that would score the museum a grant if they garnered enough votes. Through the combined forces of Kardashian and Robert's celebrity and the doll's social media reach, he has almost 9,000 Facebook likes. The museum won by a landslide. Occasionally, Convertito responds on Robert's behalf. She tries to send something to every child who writes him. Gene always had that childlike temperament around him, and we feel like Robert would want to be kind to children. And she has also responded to more poignant ones, such as an email from a girl who was being bullied at school. So, does Convertito think Robert is haunted? I don't know. I really don't, she says. I've never had a bad experience with him. I've never felt uncomfortable. It's always been a very basic relationship, and I have a job to do, and I go and do it. And whether there's something to it or not, he just allows me to get on with my job.